In a way, she should fear nothing from this format because of her experience in law and her experience as a passionate advocate of things she believes in. So, in a way, she should have it all sewn up.
The world section of thetimes.com right now, there's a piece by Will Pavia in New York asking if Kamala Harris has peaked too soon. For the first time in a month, Donald Trump is narrowly ahead, 48% to 47% support, according to the New York Times Siena College poll. What do you think about that, the idea that she might have peaked too soon?
Well, I think people always thought there would be a bit of a bounce. It's one of those presidential election themes, the convention bounce, and she clearly had an absolutely brilliant convention, along with the speeches by the Obamas and everything else, her own speech. So I guess we shouldn't be that surprised. I guess we can also say, well, this latest poll, the New York Times, won 48 Trump, 47 Kamala Harris. It's not exactly a huge wresting back of the lead by Trump. But I think underlying this, there are probably some questions. And now when we look ahead to Tuesday night's debate in Philadelphia, in a sense, there's more jeopardy for her than there is for him.
Yeah,
If
sure.
he goes off on weird tangents and does typically Trumpy repetitions and all these other things, people sort of know that's him. Whereas, of course, she, to an extent, apart from CNN and one or two other places, has been shielded from interviews or demanding situations. So I guess there's quite a bit of jeopardy for her there. And the possible outcome is that we see this very, very slight return of a polling lead to Trump, which I think you could argue is not really statistically significant, become something a bit more substantial.
In your understanding, and this might sound a sort of madly broad question, but what are Americans going to be voting about, right? Because I feel like the problem a lot of the media have, certainly in Britain, and we're often slightly in denial about how much we have this problem, is why are they going to vote for Donald Trump? Why would you do that? Why would you vote for this man again when you saw how it turned out, when you see his inability to pull a sentence together, talking normally? What's the thing here that makes her preferable to somebody who in British terms would be a sort of a moderate centrist who just does the thing that we recognise as government? There's obviously something else going on there, deep within American politics, that we find hard. What do you think it is?
Well, a couple of months ago, I went and did some reporting from a couple of the swing states, which, as we know, in these American elections, they are key. It's not the total figure. Trump may have got more of the popular vote last time. It doesn't really matter in the end. And I was in Arizona, and I thought to myself, well, look, here is a place where, the promise, they care about the border. The Trumpian promise to build that wall during his first term was not completed. It was extended a bit, but it wasn't completed, let alone getting Mexico to pay for it, which he also claimed on the campaign trail in 2016. And I thought to myself, and also the Biden stimulus, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which has pumped billions into sunrise industries, as they call them, has been really good for Arizona. We went to a new giga battery factory and there's a new chip plant. And so I thought, well, why is it when we went there that Trump was ahead 6 points in the Arizona polling? And it is fascinating to sort of probe people about that. I mean, one of the things that's happened, I think, talk about unintended consequences, is Republicans in the state characterize cost of living pressures and inflation as Bidenflation.
Right.
So it's a classic pocketbook appeal of an American electoral campaign, essentially saying to people, do you feel better or worse off? And trying to blame Biden as the incumbent. Now, of course, things have changed since then. And for a while, Kamala Harris was ahead in the Arizona polling again. But now I see she's kind of slipped just back again behind Trump. And when I said to people, but you've seen his ability or inability to deliver during his first term with the wall and everything else, they would say things like, well, this time he can complete the wall,
Yeah,
so
sure.
So there's a kind of optimism bias with Trump supporters. And I think a belief, talking to some of the Democrats in the state, that he's simply not subject to the same rules about sort of delivery of promises and campaign slogans that more normal politicians are.
Than anybody else, indeed. Let's briefly talk about the actual debate itself, which is just coming up, because the last TV debate was, of course, enormously significant. It effectively ended Biden's campaign. Listen to this.
Eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. Excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Yeah, I mean, it's painful to listen
It
to
is.
even now. The debate that's coming up then, I mean, do you think, the Democrats have been making a big deal out of the fact that Harris as a prosecutor is supposed to be good at speaking like this. Trump is not good at speaking like this. How do you think it's going to go?
Well, absolutely. I mean, in a way, she should fear nothing from this format because of her experience in law and her experience as a passionate advocate of things she believes in. So, in a way, she should have it all sewn up. But one can't help feeling there is that bit of jeopardy. And, the clip you played earlier about the coffee cup lid, I mean, could it be that she goes off at tangents? One of the criticisms of her during her vice presidential term is that she sometimes defaults to what, people call a word salad.
Yep.
Things just tumble out of her in a sort of slightly incoherent way, punctuated by nervous laughter. Those are the things I think that some of the people in her camp will be worrying about.
Yeah.
There are some moments where, extraordinarily, he might sound more lucid than her. I know that's
Yeah,
not
sure.
an easy sell for people, particularly in this country.
But you can see how that would be that would just
that
very,
could be
very
damaging.
swiftly be damaging.
And I think, as returning to this point, I think he is a known quantity to the electorate, and lots of folks, in the Democratic heartlands despise Trump, and they're not going to change their opinion, despise him even more as a result of his debate performance.
Let's talk briefly about Ukraine, because the debate continues over what weapons the West is giving to Kyiv and how they can be used. The former Defence Secretary Grant Shapps spoke to Adam and Kate on Times Radio yesterday.
What are we to do if we are prepared to allow a bully to tell us you must just allow this democratic neighbour of Russia's to be crushed, and if you don't, then we'll get to know. If you allow that to happen, right now, we have seen enough history of the 20th century to understand how that particular movie ends. You have to stand up to tyrants. You have to take some risks. And it's not just because it will save the lives of our Ukrainian friends, important as that is, it's because it will affect us all, wherever we live.
Mark Urban, if we have British weapons being given to Ukraine, being fired at and into Russia with British blessing, that seems pretty close to sort of us being in conflict with Russia.
Well, lots of lines have been crossed already. Of course, these weapons, principally what we're talking about is a missile launched from aircraft called the Storm Shadow. Now, those have been used many times against Crimea, for example. Now, in the theology of this, because the UK regards Crimea as occupied Ukrainian territory, it's different. But to Russia, which had a vote of the Russian parliament and absorbed Crimea after the 2014 referendum there, is it really different?
You mean as far as they're concerned, we're
that's
already
Russia.
doing this?
Yeah, that's
Sure.
That's Mother Russia. So it is a bit of a theological debate. There are some questions around, the almost the IP in the missiles with France and America and various other questions about does the UK singly, nationally, have the ability to say this? But in the end, I think the question that underlies this is this one that's come up again and again in this rinse repeat about arming Ukraine and how far to go is how many of these things do we actually have left? That the Western ability to give certain weapons like these or the anti-aircraft missiles, the Patriots, is quite limited now. And a lot of this discussion, and this may happen this week when Tony Blinken comes to London to talk about this, may well centre around, is there some kind of deal that could be done where UK buys missiles from Germany, they still have a lot left of their missile called the Taurus, and then gives those to Ukraine, that sort of thing. It's all trying to do workarounds on the fact that the UK and France have very few left.
Yeah, indeed. Now, look, I haven't quite left enough time for this because I'm new and I talk too much. But
Well,
you brought
I talk too much as well.
No, it's definitely on me. You've brought along a few more stories you feel.
Well, just quickly,
Yeah.
I thought if we're going to do this every week, I could say certain things that are on my radar. Now,
Please.
of course, I cannot predict. Otherwise, we just cut to the chase, and I'd give you the lottery numbers. But Haaretz newspaper last week reported that the International Criminal Court will take a view, probably this week, about whether to issue arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu, his defense minister, and Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas, who is the only surviving one of the three Hamas leaders who are also on their list for possible war crimes. Now, of course, what may happen with this is they decide not to, and it becomes a news non-event. So far, although they've promulgated the charges against these three people, some people saying, well, why don't they stop Netanyahu when he travels? The arrest warrants have not been issued. That has to be done by a judge. So that may or may not turn out to be significant. Another thing I'm watching, low probability but high impact if it happens. A lot of saber rattling recently between Ethiopia and Somalia. Essentially, Ethiopia saying we want a way out to the sea and accusing Somalia of stopping them getting that in an area called Somaliland. It's a complex story. A lot of people are worried about it. A lot of people are worried that if the threats, particularly from Ethiopia, to go ahead and invade materialise, you'll have a big regional war because Egypt is also involved in this, siding against the Ethiopians, are trying to send more troops to Somalia. So, difficult one. I doubt it'll come to a head this week, but if it does, we talked about it.
Well, it sounds depressingly like one we'll be talking about in the future. Mark Urban, thanks very much indeed. What a pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm very much looking forward to speaking to you week after week.